Hi, everybody. Joe Cioffi here on this Sunday morning, coming up on 20 minutes after 10 o'clock. And hope you had a really good Saturday. Now, hoping you have a great Sunday. Just want to mention right off the top this afternoon, those of you who are watching on Long Island, in case you want to come in from out of the cold, I will be at the Deer Park Library on Lake Avenue in Deer Park. That's at 1:30. Until 2:45. Should have a nice crowd, but there's plenty of room. And come on by. We'll go through what's been happening weather-wise up until now and where we're going from here, because we're still looking at a pretty interesting pattern going forward. So I see some folks are up this morning, like Delvin, 99 Wolves, Iron Mind, David Fuller, Jason Schaefer, and John Organo, and Timothy Veltman. So good to see you guys on here. I figured I'd do a quick live video this morning as we take a look at what's happening going forward. This coastal storm, by the way, passed way out to the east, was never really a big issue here. Brought some snow over parts of southern Virginia and into some of the west mountainous areas of North Carolina, but that's all done with. And in fact, when we take a look, just a real fast look at the radar this morning, and you can see it's pretty quiet. There is another round of interesting lake effect action going on through upstate New York and back into parts of Pennsylvania. The wind's coming in from the northwest across the lakes and not from the west. So the bulk of the lake effect activity is south of Lake Ontario, around the Rochester-Syracuse area, and also some back over into parts of northeastern Ohio. Seems like the lake effect from this week was probably busier than it was in some of those areas during the month of February, but such is the strange pattern we're in. A couple of things that are going to be going on this week. Weather system pattern is going to basically calm down for most, but not all of the country. At the moment, we have winter weather advisories up from northeastern Montana, east and southeast from there through the Dakotas into northern Iowa. This as the next system runs from the plains to the east coast. But this one is going to weaken and remain weak as it does that. So I'm not looking for any big event here. Notice much of the country today very quiet. We have some odd winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories up through a narrow band in the mountains of Oregon to southern Washington, and a bit of a flood watch up in parts of northern Idaho. And also we've got this red flag warning for New Mexico and West Texas, where the dry conditions in those areas continue, creating some fire danger there. So let me just pull up the teleconnections going forward, because there are some interesting developments here. And one of the things that models have been kind of pressing on is the fact that we are going to go back to a bit of a blocky pattern here by starting next week. So basically a week from today, the NAO goes negative and pretty much stays negative into the third 1 through 8, 8 through 15. So it'll be the third full week of April. All this while the Pacific North America Index it goes negative late this week, gets back to neutral over next weekend, and then plunges negative toward from the 15th to the 22nd to kind of go with that NAO. The EPO is positive up until the very end when it goes neutral to negative. So this is, I think this is going to be a rather interesting week. Not this week so much, but the next week would be the week of the 15th, the 16th, to the 23rd. I think could be a rather interesting period in the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states. And we'll see how models go with this as we move forward. So very quickly through today, here's the U.S. map from the GFS. And of course, our storm is offshore and gone. And we've got a cold high that is building in. You see it here. This is from this morning. Big high coming down from northern Minnesota, and that cold flow of air. We're going to be down in the 20s to around 30 by morning here. Temperatures still averaging a good 15 degrees below average. And then we've got this weak low that's coming out of the plains into the east. lower pressures into the southeast, but there's really no support for this to develop. So the low remains weak. The area of precip with it remains weak and rather underdeveloped. But it's later this week out in the west that we're going to pay attention to. And you've got a strong disturbance that's coming into the Pacific Northwest. And that develops into a fairly deep low in western Nebraska by the time we get to late Thursday into Friday, with some snow and some heavy snows breaking out in the Northern Rockies and in through the Northern Plains. The low pressure really kind of gets wrapped up by the end of the week. You've got a very deep 982 low in southeastern South Dakota with heavy snow on the north and northwest side. This is likely to be a blizzard for parts of the northernmost plains. And that low is going to sit there for a little bit and just kind of play itself out. In the meantime, this could be the mechanism to finally warm things up in the eastern part of the United States for a couple of days until a weather front can push through here on Sunday, so a week from today. And you notice that at least the models are keying on some kind of deep Gulf wave that's going to develop out of this. And then after that, this is where we go into a blocky pattern for the longer term. The models have been very adamant about this, and when we show you the upper air, you'll get a flavor for the fact that you start to see this blocky nature develop over Greenland and northeastern Canada again, higher than normal pressures and heights that gradually just kind of suppress the jet southward across the U.S. And there it is. I mean, this is a fairly blocky look. The intensity of the block varies from run to run, but it is a signature that is there on all the major weather models. The European, pretty much the same story, actually has a bit more of a blocky high that builds. And we're now moving through next week. There's that Plains major storm and blizzard, but then you start to get the higher pressures and a closed upper high between Greenland and Labrador, and you can see how far south the jet is, running south of the west coast, south of 40 degrees north, into the Rockies, into the central and southern Rockies, and then another low that's off the east coast. This is, again, in the second week of the long range. So looks like the blocky pattern is coming back. Now, whether that comes with, you got to ask yourself the question at that point. I think you have to ask yourself the question, even though it is very late in the season, and understandably so. You're talking about now the second half of April. Snowfalls are rather rare in the second half of April in the Northeast, maybe a little less rare up in central and northern New England, but certainly very rare in my neck of the woods. You got to wonder whether something might happen in that time frame to cause a rare late season snowfall for somebody. Look, if it's going to happen, if it's going to happen, this is probably the year that it would, considering everything we've been through since the end of February, beginning of March. And you're going to have a blocky pattern, so it'll depend on whether there's something in there in the flow that will allow it to happen. That's the big question, and that's the one big unknown through all of this. So, Jason Schaefer, yes, that significant coastal storm, it is significant in the sense that it is bringing down this cold air for today and for tonight and Monday. It's really getting a little bit played out how chilly it is, and I think everybody is just wondering that we could wind up, just are we ever going to get warm? And I think that is going to happen. We have a shot for 60s and 70s next Saturday, I think, provided that any warm fronts do what they're supposed to do, what they don't like to do, and that is move far enough northward. So we've got our fingers crossed that that'll happen. Thank you, Timothy. I hope the library presentation goes well too. They usually do. They're very, they're a lot of fun to do and very interesting. By the way, people, have their own conceptions about how weather works. So I think they are surprised at just how much actually goes into it. Ryan Hastava, the long range into pattern change to bring warmth. You're going to have to get this we're going to have to work through that blocky pattern that is setting up for the third week of April. I'm hoping it gets out of the way because I've got 3 days of fishing up to the north, and I don't want it to be cold. So I got my fingers crossed that we get some kind of pattern change toward the late month. But beyond next week, it's hard for me to really come to any conclusion of that. But we're going to have to get at least through the 20th of the month. Doesn't look all that promising. Michael Groom from Northern Delaware, above average snowfall first season since 14-15. I've had 6 in a row here. One of the things that's come to mind, at some point, we're due for a subpar year where I am anyway. 6 in a row is, when you look back at records, has, hardly ever happened, and in some cases has never happened. So to stretch it to 7, well, I guess nothing's impossible, but I would like to think that statistically we are at an extreme here. And if New York City Central Park, I believe if they get as little as 6 more inches of snow, this will be the snowiest decade on record for them. So it's been quite a 10-year period for snow lovers. Even though they complain all the time, this is about as good as it's going to get. So just bear that in mind going forward. When does the block break down, Dio? I mean, I can only see back beyond 15, 16 days, so it may break down sometime after that. Blocking patterns usually have a shelf life of about 2 weeks. Sometimes they can last longer. Sometimes they can last just a matter of days. But I would say the average shelf life of a blocking pattern is about 2 weeks. So that would take us almost to the end of the month if that is the case. And after that, maybe we can get a long-term warm-up. Javon Johnson, you want cold coming for Columbia, South Carolina, and by that I know what you mean is that you want it cold enough for snow. That isn't going to happen. We're too late in the game for that, for you anyway. Although relatively speaking, it was fairly close to get those snows down into Virginia during yesterday into last night. And David Fuller is going hiking. I might get a bit breezy later today. I don't see too much in the way of wind at the moment, at least out my way. But just to my rule with all these things this time of year about going outside is you're always wise to overdress. And because you can always take clothes off, but if you don't have them with you, it becomes very, very hard to stay warm. All right, folks, hope you're having a great day. I'm going to leave it here at this point. We'll possibly check in tonight with an update, but I'm not promising anything. Otherwise, we're back to normal tomorrow with my regular live stream at 6 o'clock Eastern time. And in the evening, and we also have the Joe Cioffi show back on Monday at 9:15 on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Have a great day, everybody.